I hate to be stereotypical, but they seem to always be the ones that get really tired. So how do you do it effectively?
Well, how I do it effectively is by not taking that approach of assuming that the way an event has been planned is the way it must be carried out.
I mean, I don't know about Calgary, the activist culture here. I'm not super, like, I think I'm getting a glimpse of it, like, and even at the Judy Rubik thing, I think I got a glimpse of it too, but I mean, in Montreal, my understanding, I mean, people have differences of opinion around the Black Bloc, diversity of tactics, etc. But for the most part, when a march is identified as family friendly, like when it's like clearly like, okay, this march is family friendly, that it's like 99% out of 100, it's like usually very much respected that it will be a certain peaceful march, right? And that's every time I've gone to a march where they've said this is a family friendly march, it's almost entirely been respected. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I don't know about the, and yeah, to me, like, there's a difference between talking about the Black Bloc, like, specifically, and talking about pro and con, et cetera, like, that to me is, like, this very context-specific conversation that it's hard for me to have an opinion about, because sometimes I'm maybe like, okay, it makes sense, but other times I'm like, okay, that really doesn't make sense at all. But when we talk about like understanding violence and responses to state violence, to me on a broader level, that's where I can understand why the response to, when people respond to state violence with violence, I can understand that. Because I mean that's also the history of the world too, right? Like I mean my parents were Korean immigrants, and during the 60s, 70s, 80s it was a U.S. backed Korean dictatorship for like 3 decades, and like my father participated in storming, like occupying like people's, like the leaders, like politician leaders' buildings and stuff like that, and he wasn't thinking, well, I'm violent, non-violent, I'm Black Bloc, I'm not Black Bloc. He was thinking, I'm being repressed by the state, my rights are being trampled on, I have no rights, like I can't, there were like things that were being, like songs that were being like, so there's all this level of censorship and brutality, etc. And so it was just this sort of response to that, right? Which I think if you look at like most of the world that post-1960, which is like post-colonialism and but also a lot of dictatorships like globally, I mean there were so many uprisings that happened in so many different places, and and part of those uprisings were sometimes considered in our terms violent, in other terms non-violent, right? But there's also a lot of trauma and death that happened through those movements as well, which is why there's so many immigrants, I think, here who have a history but are really, really reticent of participating in movements where there might be violence because they've had that experience, or their parents have, even though like so many, I think, immigrants here, especially from Central South America, Asia and Africa, have a really deep understanding of state oppression and state violence, whether it's through colonialism or through dictatorship, and so, yeah.
Good points.
Just to build on that point, I don't really speak about that so much as personal history, but one of the things that really worries me with things like liberal, nonviolent discourse, especially in activist movements, is they have a tendency to reference history and to whitewash it, especially when they reference things like the Indian independence struggle and the civil rights struggle, and they tend to whitewash it as being only nonviolent because of the quotes of some predominant leaders, and they write off the role that diversity of tactics, or let's be honest, aggression, had in those movements. At least the threat of violence had that someone like Martin Luther King can make reference to the Nation of Islam or other more radical groups and say that if you don't bargain with us, if you don't bargain with us being nonviolent, then we do have this. Like, this is what can come because we're going to react with the same amount of violence that you're pushing on us. So I think that that's my major fear. As much as I respect pacifism, and I have a profound respect for it, as I am a pacifist myself, my fear is that we tend to whitewash history and say that all struggles must be nonviolent.
I wanted to jump in. I think for myself, I'm just thinking about like having supported the Mohawk uprising and also like the spirit of during the anti-apartheid times. I think that for me, what I'm more concerned about is what are our social contracts with each other as a community. That's what's more important to me than the, like, anything. If anyone decides in the middle of it, I'm going to do whatever. I remember I think you were one of the peacekeepers in one of the anti-war in Iraq rallies.
Back in 2003.
Yeah, there was a group of young men that started basically beating on all the peacekeepers. They just decided they were angry and they started, it was terrible. And my partner, who's Iranian, got called every name in the book. I mean, it was terrible what happened, and we had no process of dealing with this type of thing. And everyone who was a sort of a peacekeeper at that point decided they didn't want to be a peacekeeper at any other rallies. So we lost about 15, 20 people because they were so disrespected, and the community didn't know what to do. So my question, my father made an interesting comment that, and I think I shared that in class around around how our human rights charter just enshrines individual rights, doesn't enshrine social responsibilities and social contracts, and how that charter is flawed, highly flawed in that context. And I thought that's a great comment that he made, and I agree with it. And so I guess as a smaller community, what's our social contract to each other, to the well-being of each other, to making kind of even stopping on the road and making a decision and talking it out till it's done, right? And that kind of thing. And maybe it takes more time, and we're all busy in the capitalist upstream of efficient and effective activist movements and actions where we don't have time to talk either. So I guess that's to take it out of the, nonviolent action, pacifism. I don't want to, it's not that. I do get quite nervous when I don't have social contracts with others around me, and mostly in my history, it's been white guys who decide to start acting violent to freak me out, and that bothers me. I have to say it bothers me. And but if I have social contracts and relationships with people, and we've made decisions as a community, that's going to feel really different. And I'll know when to take my daughter and go, right?
Yeah.
So.
Sorry, I just before we all go to it, just a couple, because you talked about what next, and a couple interesting things that have happened. Like I would just really encourage people to do like really creative things as well. And so, like be willing to engage in dialogue, but also don't be afraid of like a bit of conflict as well, because sometimes conflict can engage and spark dialogue or change. Like there's some marches, for example, where people would march on the street, like a group of 20 people, and then they would like lie down like as if they were dead in front of like a bank or something, and then there was an anti-racist action that I was a part of where we went to the park and we had all these, we made these silhouettes and had this sort of education, not deportation sign, and like we had like facts around sort of the racialization of poverty and the feminization of poverty, and the impact on the tuition hikes on racialized women, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was kind of like our action, which in the context of Law 78, it was actually considered illegal because there was more than 50 people over there, and we didn't tell the police what we're doing. And so, we're doing that kind of thing too. And also, whatever action you do, try to make it visible. So try to take a photo, try to take a video, because then you can pass it online through Facebook, through Twitter, and people in Quebec actually do, pay attention. Like, there's tons of videos and videos, which vice versa, right? People here, I mean, that's how a lot of you have a better understanding of what's happening in Montreal, is like through the Facebook and Twitter and videos and stuff. But there was the march that happened yesterday, and we passed it out, and I think there's hundreds of people in Quebec who now know there's a group of people in Calgary who participated in that march, like I'm hundreds. Like,
well, we were lucky to have Judy Revick with us, who has a large following, and tweeted that out. That she was in that march.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine who's francophone who knows nobody in Alberta, and he said, oh, there's 2 people that he knew who forwarded it onto their friends before he even forwarded it. So
that makes me so happy.
Yeah. So I think it's, I don't underestimate that, and the power of the social media to be able to communicate what you're doing, no matter how small it might be.
Well, and the other part that goes with that is that when we show people that we're doing this stuff, it shows people that it's possible to do this stuff. And so if you go out in your neighborhood and you're banging the pot in the sidewalk in front of your house, it shows your neighbors that it can be done.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
Well, I think that goes back to when we were talking about just having lots of people might have it within themselves, or they might recognize that there's a problem, but they're just terrified or don't even know that what's stopping them is their own fear. It's just, the system has told us we aren't empowered, which, thank you, Occupy taught me that's a load of crap.
Create affinity groups and do small actions, put it online, and like and you never know. Like there's some small actions that were organized in Montreal by literally like 3 or 4 people, and then hundreds of people went, right, and participated. And so it's just, it's very, like just like don't be afraid to try those things, and also like do things like this, right, like panels and discussions and workshops and stuff like that. I think that's like really, really, really important.
And along with that is don't be discouraged when you organize stuff that almost nobody shows up to.
Yeah.
Because I have organized so many events, and I've done protests where I was the only one who showed up. I did the critical mass bike ride by myself.
If you go and you organize and you're the only one showing up, call yourself a Buddhist and you'll be fine.
Well, but the thing is, if I hadn't had that practice of doing those things where I was the only one who showed up, or there were just half a dozen of us or whatever, then I wouldn't have done something like organizing last night where we had hundreds of us show up.
Exactly,
that's
the way it works.
I want to invite people to a kind of an impromptu action and discussion that I want. I think that, like Steve said the other night, this is a very, very powerful meme, and we need to know how we can make it our own and how it can resonate with Calgarians. And that starts with a discussion, but it also starts by making them. If anybody wants to join me on Friday evening at my place, I'm going to be getting some more of this, and I want to create a Red Square Brigade, that we can cut them and make them and pin them and discuss, and then decide how we're going to distribute them. So Friday at my place. Tomorrow, Friday?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, tomorrow.
I'm just writing down some good websites, like so Quebec, www.quebecprotest.com. Are people familiar with this one? Yeah, probably people are, but anyways, it's a good one that translates a lot of material from French to English. If you want to check out the nightly marches and stuff and demos that are happening, CUTV Montreal has done an amazing job of covering that footage and interviewing people. It's a mix of French and English to go back and forth, but so it's cutvmontreal.ca/live. And then Twitter, if you want to know what's happening kind of like real time as a march is happening, then you can go to Manif Twitter, what is the hashtag? Manif en cours. Sorry, and then just a final thing too is a legal defense fund. So there's like, I think over 1,000 people who have been arrested and charged now, especially with Bill 70, but also if you added people before as well. And so their class, which is one of the student organizations, a coalition of student organizations, have created a legal defense fund. And so this is another really good way of showing solidarity. So it's Fonds Légal 2012, so yeah, I don't know how to say Fonds, yeah. So FONDSLEGAL and then 2012.org. So yeah, those are the kind of key
Great,
stuff.
thank you, Ed. Thanks again. And I'm
Yeah.
so sorry, I don't know your name, but thank you for filming for us. Chelsea, thanks Chelsea, really appreciate that. That's great.
Will you be able to, when you
And
put
go
that
out
online,
and
send the link to the
Post all those notes.
event page and everything? Thanks.
That's perfect, thanks. Thanks everyone, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Good discussion.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.